You don't remember when you stopped feeling. There wasn't a dramatic moment, no explosion, no obvious wound, just a gradual narrowing, a quiet internal agreement. This is not the time. You learn to stay alert instead of soft, capable instead of curious, functional instead of present. You learned that survival required clarity, not emotion, precision, not vulnerability. And so, feeling became optional, later, deferred, quietly shelved. At first, it worked. Of course it did. It always does. You became dependable, adaptable, impressive even. You could read situations before they happened. You could anticipate tension, adjust your tone, disappear when necessary. You became fluent in what was needed and illiterate in what you needed. The irony is brutal but elegant. The very system that saved you is the one now keeping you half alive. You survived by turning down the volume on your inner life, and now you wonder why everything feels distant, muted, or slightly unreal. This is not emotional numbness in the dramatic sense. It's something quieter, more disciplined. This is a nervous system that learned to prioritize stability over expression. In psychological terms, this adaptation often forms in environments where emotional tolerance was limited, not necessarily abusive, just constrained, where feelings were inconvenient, overwhelming, or ignored. Over time, the child learns that emotions don't resolve problems, they create them. So the brain reroutes. Hypervigilance becomes the new emotional language. Instead of asking, you scan. Instead of feeling, you calculate. The default mode network, the system responsible for internal narrative and self-referential thought, becomes overactive. Thinking replaces feeling. Analysis replaces experience. The body is no longer the place where information arrives. The mind takes over, becoming both translator and gatekeeper. This is often paired with avoidant attachment, not because the child didn't want closeness, but because closeness came with conditions. Emotional proximity was unpredictable. Sometimes it was available. Sometimes it vanished. Sometimes it cost too much. So the child learned a sophisticated strategy: self-reliance without reliance. You internalized care instead of expecting it. You became your own witness, your own regulator, your own containment system. Neurologically, this means the emotional circuits that govern safety and connection were trained under pressure. The vagal system learned that calm does not come from being held, but from being prepared. The stress response never fully turns off. It just becomes efficient. You don't panic, you endure, you don't collapse, you function. From the outside, this looks like strength. People admire it. They call you composed, insightful, resilient. You rarely lose control, but internally, there's a cost that's harder to name. Feeling becomes labor. Rest feels undeserved. Joy feels suspicious. There's a constant sense that life is happening just beyond reach, like watching through glass. This is the grief of the child who survived instead of felt. Not the grief of something taken, but of something never practiced. Emotional muscles that were never allowed to develop now ache quietly in adulthood. You can understand emotions intellectually, but they don't land in the body. They hover, they pass through. You can articulate pain beautifully and still feel untouched by it. Carl Jung warned of this split when he spoke about the danger of one-sided development, the psyche becoming overly identified with function while abandoning feeling. When survival becomes identity, the soul doesn't die, but it waits. It waits beneath layers of competence, beneath performance, beneath responsibility, hoping for permission to re-enter. And this waiting is exhausting. You may notice it in relationships. You care deeply, but something holds you back. Intimacy feels invasive, not because you don't want it, but because your system doesn't trust it. You were trained to regulate alone, to soften only in private, to feel safely in theory, not in real time. So even when connection arrives, your body braces, you stay alert, you monitor, you survive the moment instead of inhabiting it. This isn't a failure, it's a legacy. The child who learned to survive did so because feeling without support is dangerous. Emotions require witnesses. Without them, feelings overwhelm or evaporate. So you adapted brilliantly. But adaptation is not the same as completion. What once kept you intact now keeps you distant. Healing here is not about becoming emotional overnight. It's about renegotiation. Teaching the nervous system that feeling is no longer a threat, that presence does not require vigilance, that you are allowed to experience without managing the outcome. This work is slow, subtle, often uncomfortable. It involves letting sensations arrive without immediately interpreting them, allowing pauses without filling them, letting the body speak before the mind translates. It's less about insight and more about tolerance, building the capacity to stay with experience instead of outrunning it. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, that's not a flaw, that's recognition. Recognition is the first crack in survival armor, and armor, no matter how elegant, is heavy. If this reflection helped you see yourself with more clarity or more compassion, you're not alone. Leaving a thought, an experience, or even a quiet acknowledgement in the comments helps this conversation continue, not just here, but for others who are still surviving in silence. And if you want to keep exploring these hidden architectures of the mind together, staying connected is a way of saying, I'm ready to feel more than I once could. You don't have to stop surviving all at once. You just have to make room for something else to live alongside it.